Starting next week on BBC One, a new series of Police follows the plainclothesmen of No. 5 Regional Crime Squad engaged in Operation Carter. The evidence of 3 supergrasses began the biggest operation in Regional Crime Squad history to round up a network of top London criminals.
Depositions. Some of them could be recognised, some of them phrases on it, Copley, White, Wright.
For months, the whole operation was filmed in conditions of total secrecy, but now the story can be told. In the new Radio Times, 2 detectives speak out about their job and state their opinion of the BBC Police series. And there's a traveller's tale to tell when Simon, Sarah and Peter return from Expedition Canada for a new series of Blue Peter on Mondays and Thursdays beginning next week. Leaf through their holiday snaps in the pages of the new Radio Times. Then turn to the back page where the new strip cartoon is the wonderful Will-O-the-Wisp.
What a rotten programme. I'll rotten programme him.
Animation and imagination in the new Radio Times.
This is BBC One. And now the news headlines from John Humphreys.
Arab leaders, including Yasser Arafat, meeting in Fez, are reported to have reached unanimous agreement on a Middle East peace plan. It seems they're prepared to accept President Reagan's proposals, but only with several conditions attached. The Arabs want to form a sovereign state on the West Bank and in Gaza, and they'd expect Israel to give up East Jerusalem to become part of the new state. It's almost certain that both President Reagan and the Israelis will reject the plan. A Polish diplomat who'd been hiding in the besieged embassy in Bern tonight climbed onto the roof and escaped. He's the second member of the embassy staff to get out. The authorities apparently knew he was hiding in the embassy and police helped him to get away. The latest deadline set by the gunman who threatened to blow up the building and the remaining hostages expires on Friday morning. But the Swiss are increasingly confident of negotiating an end to the crisis. The TUC conference at Brighton has voted against discussing pay restraint with the Conservative administration or any other government. The decision means there's no chance of forming an incomes policy with any future Labour or Alliance government. But delegates voted to stay in NEDI, the National Economic Development Council. They see the council as a valuable channel of communication with government. It's been a bittersweet day for Britain at the European Athletics Championships in Athens. Sebastian Coe, who'd been expected to win the 800 metres easily, was beaten into second place by the unknown German Hans-Peter Ferner. Afterwards, Coe said he'd taken a risk by entering the race without being fully fit. But in the decathlon, Daley Thompson won Britain her first gold medal and set a new world record in the process. He's now added the European Championship to his Olympic and Commonwealth titles. And that's all from the newsroom tonight. Good night.
And now on BBC One, it's time for the late night weather forecast with Michael Fish.
Good evening to you. Once again, my message is to make the most of tomorrow, as with low pressure all around us, the weather is still far from settled. But tomorrow, I think, as this weak ridge of high pressure moves across, most of us will have a spell of dry weather and there'll be some sunshine around as well. But we've got to, first of all, lose the effects of that particular area of low pressure. That'll go overnight, but already another one brewing up on the horizon. The warm front from that one will be pushing in towards northern areas during the latter part of tonight and through tomorrow. But it'll be a very weak affair, I think. It'll keep the weather cloudy, but perhaps not more than just the odd spot of rain. And it's the cold front that we're going to have to wait for. That'll bring quite a bit of rain down across most parts of the country during the course of Friday, although perhaps not getting to the southeastern corner until Saturday, and then a change to cooler weather with some showers around. Still, that's a long way off. Let's now look at the picture for midday tomorrow, when the process is, of course, only just beginning, and we still have relatively high pressure close to the southeastern corner, but those fronts are moving in, and the weak warm front crossing, as you see, the north of the country. But back to tonight now, and for most places it'll be a fine, dry night with well-broken cloud, a little bit on the misty side, and certainly misty and murky in many of these western areas where the cloud will thicken as the night goes on, and just here and there may be the odd spot of light rain and drizzle as well. And then tomorrow, well, much of that western slice, including the north of Scotland, looks set for a pretty cloudy day, I think. Maybe just here and there in the more sheltered spots, the odd bright interval, but mostly staying cloudy, and perhaps just 1 or 2 spots of rain and drizzle around as well. Most of that in western Scotland, the Lake District and Northern Ireland, where as the day goes on, it'll also become pretty windy. In the east of Scotland and the northeast of England, perhaps a little bit of rain around to begin with, but there the weather tending to brighten up as the day goes on. And most central and eastern parts of England and the Channel Islands, a bright day. There may be some patchy cloud around, but if anything, rather more in the way of sunshine than there was today, and as a result turning out warmer as well. 22 centigrade 72 Fahrenheit. Well, that's all from me. A very good night to you.
Now let's take a quick look at tomorrow evening on BBC One. There's more from the European Athletics Championships at 6:40, which is later than the time shown in Radio Times. Then at 7:25, Top of the Pops, and at 8 o'clock, a new series of Wildlife on One. This first programme's about the bat that cracked the frog code, a cunning little creature which has developed a way of homing in on its prey. At 8:30, Peter Davison and Robert Glenister return for a new series of escapades as Brian and Steve in Sink or Swim. Then at 9:30, after the news, a new drama serial, Claire, the story of a teenage girl who goes to foster parents after 8 years in care. Des O'Connor's guests at 10:20 are Mike Yarwood, Foster Brooks, the American comedian, and Stephanie Lawrence, who's currently starring in Evita. And at 11:10, the last edition in this year's series of Medical Express completes tomorrow night's programmes on BBC One. Now, just before we go, may I remind you that tomorrow's prom celebrates the 60th anniversary of the BBC with an all-English evening, including a specially commissioned piece by Richard Rodney Bennett called Anniversaries, and also works by Vaughan Williams, Elgar and Walton. Janet Baker is the soloist with the BBC Symphony Orchestra under James Loughran. That's tomorrow evening at 7:30 on Radio 3 and Radio 4. Well, now the time's approaching 1 minute to midnight, and it's time for us to close. So on behalf of all of us here on BBC One, this is Malcolm Einan wishing you a very good night. Good night.